Oh, hey, what's up, Books listener? How you doing? I'm excited because this week I'm going to bring you The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly. Yes, in the last episode, we did chat with Kevin. He was here on the show, and he was talking about this book and, well, a lot of other things that you can go back and listen to that conversation if you didn't already. I'm hoping that this is going to be a bit of a shorter episode. That's my goal, at least, is to bring you a little snippet, a little taste of Kevin's new book. I'm going to read to you from the book, as I do sometimes, as well as highlight. So this book, The Inevitable, it's talking about inevitable changes in technology over the next about 20 to 30 years. So that's the vibe. And I think it'd be really great if you, especially if you have a startup, if you're interested in culture, any kind of business really, definitely I feel like there's a big resonance here in knowing about this, but also for artists, writers, and just human beings, just to kind of understand where things are going. All right, so Kevin Kelly, he is one of the co-founders of Wired magazine. He co-founded the Quantified Self movement, which is the self-tracking movement. If you have a Fitbit or you ever, count your steps every day, that's it. That's what we're talking about. And he serves on the board of the Long Now Foundation, along with like a million other accolades. So let's get into the latest book by Kevin Kelly, The Inevitable. These are some of my favorite moments, things that spoke to me and that I really want to share with you, and that hopefully you get inspired to learn from and maybe read the book yourself. So here it is. This is Kevin Kelly's The Inevitable. Enjoy. All right, so the book title is The Inevitable. What is inevitable? Well, Kevin Kelly, right in the first few pages, tells us that, yeah, I know that that's a loaded word, saying that something is definitely going to happen. So he makes it clear what he means. He says, I mean inevitable in a different way. And the way that he's talking about is the kind of inevitability that if we were to replay history, right, from all the way in the past, the Big Bang till now, there are certain things that we can say without a doubt would have happened, right? One of those being the telephone. He writes, telephony, long-distance electrical transmitted voice messages, was inevitable, but the iPhone was not. And what he's referring to there is the idea, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but when the telephone was invented, there was actually something like 20 or 30 other people who invented it within like days or weeks of Alexander Graham Bell's invention. And you just don't hear about those people because, well, Graham Bell had the better marketing or the better team, or it's the whole VHS versus beta. There's a lot of times there's wars of, getting the thing out there that's going to stick. And then history remembers the winners. So we remember the one person that won. And that's basically what he's talking about, though, is that within these technologies, they are the physics and math being, all things being equal, tend to favor certain behaviors. Certain behaviors within these forces would come to the surface. Something like the wheel would have eventually happened. Maybe the SUV, not so much. So that's what he's looking at. Really, there is sort of like an academic kind of philosophical layer to a lot of this writing here. And it's deep in that way, looking at the ways that nature, the history of the world, biology, a lot of these kind of sciences influence the day-to-day, the iPhone, the apps that we have, AI, all this kind of stuff. And he's pulling that together in this book to show us what patterns and trends are inevitable in the next 20 to 30 years. In that journey, he comes up with 12 technological forces, as he calls them, these 12 forces that are inevitable. And each of the chapters is one of the 12 forces. The words themselves don't really mean too much: becoming, flowing, screening, accessing. If I just say those to you, in and of themselves, you can't really take away a learning from them. But I'm going to do the first three, and you need to go a little bit deeper, and I'm going to take you there so that the first three, becoming, cognifying, and flowing, by the end of this episode will make some sense to you. So let's start with becoming. It's the first of the inevitabilities. And in my opinion, it's one that it goes further than just, the next 20 to 30 years. This, to me, this idea of becoming is really ingrained in all things that are alive. And so let me explain that to you by reading the first few pages from Becoming. So here we go.
It is gone in the wind. Broken string run away.
Kevin Kelly writes, "It's taken me 60 years, but I had an epiphany recently. Everything, without exception, requires additional energy in order to maintain itself. I knew this in the abstract as the famous second law of thermodynamics, which states that everything is falling apart slowly. This realization is not just the lament of a person getting older, but long ago I learned that even the most inanimate things we know of, stone, iron, columns, copper pipes, gravel roads, a piece of paper, they won't last very long without attention and fixing and the loan of an additional order. Existence, it seems, is chiefly maintenance." Now, that is quite the epiphany. That's something I learned early on when I started building websites for people. And maintaining the website became almost bigger sometimes than the job of just building it. And I started to notice that in the biology of the code that I was writing for these systems and seeing how it degrades just month over month by the whole ecosystem getting upgraded. I was able to kind of watch a system, the code, the website itself, fall apart and need updating. And I started to notice that myself, as Kevin does, as he outlines in the chapter. I started to notice that in my body as I was getting older, in New York City, the biology of the city, the ecosystem that is New York City. Remember being super young in high school, and the meatpacking district was actually a place where they packed and sold meat. And now it's this, trendy nightclub area. But just seeing how things evolve and how they get maintained, get updated, and how that's part of the process. And that's what this chapter is all about. So, wow, that first paragraph really resonated with me. Let me read a little bit more from Becoming. So, Kevin writes, "What has surprised me recently is how unstable even the intangible is. Keeping a website or a software program afloat is like keeping a yacht afloat. Yep. It is a black hole for attention. I can understand why a mechanical device like a pump would break down after a while. Moisture rusts metal, or the air oxides membranes, or lubricants evaporate, all of which require repair. But I wasn't thinking that the non-material world of bits would also degrade. What's to break? Apparently everything." So that's what Becoming is all about. To me, it's finding an acceptance in this idea that things are always going to be deteriorating, always needing maintenance. And in that, if there is an acceptance through that, I find it's kind of relieving, because it allows me to think about even starting new projects a lot of times. You're like, oh, if you think of something that you want to complete, some project, and you're like, even this podcast for me, it's like, yeah, I can just make a few every week that becomes much more work than I think. Right now I'm having the software upgrade. Literally, this is true. The software ScreenFlow that I use is upgrading and crashing when I'm exporting. So every week there's like new challenges, and it may be in the software, or your voice may not be working. Whatever it is, there's always going to be challenges, and something in accepting this as an inevitability in the things that we invest our time into is somewhat relieving to me. And he talks about this as a consumer, and basically saying that, the way the market is looking, we're moving from fixed products to always upgrading services and subscriptions. And because of that, there's a benefit to getting in on the ground floor of that. If you look at Uber, right? Uber is the biggest taxi service in the world. They own no cars. They have no products, right? They're the service, though. And they built in to their business model the upgrades that have to happen so that you as the customer don't have to worry about that. And as a business, they have it in their model, right? So that's some of the examples and some of the ways that we can think about this. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit more into Becoming. So kind of rounding out the chapter here is that once we accept and admit, this becoming, and he gives a lot of different examples, but once we kind of come to terms with that, we can look at the way the web is moving and in ourselves, kind of make peace that we're going to have to keep learning too. So our learning this is the thing that I love. It's like our learning also is degrading. And not just because our memory might be degrading, but because there's an arms race, right? Of everything is getting upgraded and quicker and different all the time. So we need to keep up, which the positive, because that sounds like a negative thing, but the positive side of that is that everybody else needs to keep up as well. So if you look out and you think, oh man, those developers at Google or my friend who's, whatever it is, who's like so smart, you can become that person because we're all kind of moving. Like there's no just like finish line of any of this. So it's inspiring to me to think if there's something new that I want to get into, I can still get into that, because the reality is that learning skills is like you're on a treadmill, right? Everybody is. You don't just learn how to become a great artist and then stop. You have to constantly learn. And I can get in on that. I can, and it's not just if I want to learn a new coding language, but maybe it's, if I want to be an artist or write a play or whatever industry you might want to get into, or innovation, right? Kevin mentions this thing in here too about how he says 30 years after the internet, it feels saturated with apps and platforms and devices, right? Doesn't it? You look around, you're like, well, everything's already done. It always feels like, it's already been done. Every generation feels that way. And then we look back, right? If you were to look back now at like the, 90s, you're like, or 99, you're like, oh my God, nothing. If I went back there now, I could rule the world. I'll make Uber back then, right? For example. And so he's saying we need to think more long term. And he says, here's the thing. In terms of the internet, nothing has happened yet. He writes, the internet is still at the beginning of its beginning. It is only becoming. If we would climb into a time machine, journey 30 years into the future, and from that vantage point look back at today, we'd realize that most of the greatest products running the lives of the citizens in 2050 were not invented until after 2016. People in the future will look at their holodecks and wearable virtual reality contact lenses and downloadable avatars and AI interfaces and say, oh, you didn't really even have the internet back then, or whatever they call it back then. And they'd be right, because from our perspective right now, what's the greatest thing we have online right now, right? We have all these things, but all the miraculous inventions, there's tons that aren't yet here yet. The craziest ones, right? The ones that are impossible to even imagine, So looking to those people in the future and thinking about a longer now, those people would have told us, hey, people of 2016, can you imagine how awesome it would be to be you? The internet was a wide open frontier in 2016. You could just like pick any category and just like add AI to it. Put it on the cloud, be like a gazillionaire. So that's the idea of becoming. We're constantly evolving. Technology is evolving like nature. And you, my friend, you are not late to get in on, I don't know, life. Join it. So you're not late. That's what becoming's about. All right, so chapter 2 is called Cognifying, and that's the second of one of the technological inevitabilities that Kevin talks about in the book. Cognifying, well, let me break that down. What he means by cognifying essentially is AI. He's basically saying that things will get smarter. If you've heard of the Internet of Things or artificial intelligence, to a large part, that is what he's talking about. And he really believes this is an untouched market. So when we were talking about becoming a little bit ago, about all the things that you could get into to innovate the internet and the world, this one, Cognifying, is a specific one that he's like, in the next 20 to 30 years, this is what we're talking about. Let me read. So he's saying, amid all the activity that we're seeing now, a picture of our AI future is coming into view, and it's not HAL 9000. A discrete machine animated by characteristic, yet potentially homicidal, human-like consciousness, right? From the movie, 2001 Space Odyssey. Anyway, so it's not a machine that's going to kill us, or the singularity rapture, which is basically saying that machines are going to kill us, like Terminator. So he's saying machines are not going to kill us. They're going to be cool. They're going to stay cool. And that's his vision of AI. He's saying the AI on the horizon looks more like Amazon Web Services, right? Which is a cheap, kind of reliable way to run your website and services on the cloud, Amazon Web Services or AWS. We use that here. This common utility will serve you as much IQ as you want, but no more than you need. You'll simply plug into the grid and get AI as if it was electricity. It will enliven inert objects, such as electricity did more than a century past. 3 generations ago, I really like this line. He says, 3 generations ago, many a tinkerer struck it rich by taking a tool and making an electrical version. Take a manual pump, electrify it. Find a hand wringer washer, electrify it. Right? That was, if you look back at the past, it was like everything, just add electricity to it. The kitchen of the future, egg timers, anything you want. That was me kind of riffing. But the entrepreneurs didn't need to generate the electricity. They bought it from the grid and used it to automate the previously manual things. Now, everything that we formerly electrified, we will cognify. There is almost nothing we can think of that cannot be made new, different, or more valuable by infusing it with some extra IQ. In fact, the business plans of the next 10,000 startups are easy to forecast. Take X and add AI. Take X and add AI. Find something that can be made better by adding online smartness to it. All right, so he goes deeper into this by even giving a handful of what do you think of the next startup ideas? Cognified nursing, cognified toys, cognified sports. He's like, take these ideas and make them. I want you to do these, because he wants to see them. And then he says, part of cognifying is just coming to terms with machines will get this smartness and will replace some of the jobs that we have nowadays. And this has been, as far as becoming goes, this has been happening for centuries now, right? Where technologies come and replace older jobs. And he's like, we need to let go of that. So we need to let go of things that the machines can do better than us and not be afraid that they're going to, turn on us and murder our faces, but that they're going to work with us. And if we trust them, then we can use that cognitive ability in our machines. And he says this is not a race against the machines. If we race against them, we will lose. This is a race with the machines. It is inevitable that the robots take our jobs and let them help us dream up new work that matters, period. Yep. All right, so there's a lot more in there if you want to read it yourself, but again, really nicely put. All right, finally, I'm going to just tap into the third of the 12. The third one here is flowing, the third inevitability. And flowing, this I really like. I love this chapter. A lot of this idea of flowing came from Kevin Kelly's blog, kk.org. And I read this a few years ago, and I see he's just kind of reworked this idea and put it in the book. But the idea of flowing, or at least the part that I really love, is the acceptance. So first, you have to accept that the internet is a copy machine. Basically, if something can get copied, it will. If that doesn't make sense to you, I would say read this in full, because that is a fact of how the internet works. Basically, even if you were to upload something to the internet one time, it is being copied because it has to send it from server node to server node. There is no not copying something. And that was the big problem with the music and Napster and the RIAA suing people, was just that it doesn't make sense to say that you can't copy and share something on the internet in certain ways, because just by putting it there one time on Spotify or wherever, the infrastructure of the internet copies things. It's what it does. And so it's hard to deny that biology. All right, so that's my rant on that. He goes briefly into that point. And then says, well, if it is a copying machine, then by that means everything is free on the internet, right? And we know that, right? Because you can just share. Anything that can be digitized can be shared pretty easily. So if things are copyable, to be copied, and if many things are free, music now is often free, videos, blog content, images, he's like, well, what are we paying for? And this is what he breaks down in an argument called better than free. And he wrote this, I think it was 6 years ago now, and a lot of it has even already come to be, the truth. And there's still so many more kind of good nuggets in here. So he's saying, well, what would people pay for? And this was before Spotify. And he, this is in the height of it. And he talked about how, well, people will pay for things like accessibility. So being able to access, I'll use music as the analogy because it's a pretty good one. Being able to access the music consistently on the iPhone, on your laptop. The accessibility of it is something people will pay for, such as with Spotify, right? Discoverability is something that people will pay for. It's, if things are free and it's all over the internet, being able to quickly discover the best things, right, and find them quicker is a generative, what he says, is something generative that you would pay for, as well as findability, right, which is something that like Netflix or Hulu, in a way, they have a good findability because they allow you to kind of sort through the junky, versions or the rips, the Chinese rips of DVDs that you give subtitles over the bottom. They find you the better version and they get it to you quicker. All right, so I'm kind of riffing here to give you an idea, but he breaks this down in this one chapter, this just beautiful list of things that you can sell on the internet that he writes are better than free. And the whole kind of ethos and push is, hey, you listening, whatever you're doing right now, if you can, if it is a digital product or whatever part of that is digital, make that free, share it as much as possible, and then sell these things, the personalization, the findability, the discoverability, the immediacy of it. And he just goes page over page of how you can find value by giving something away for free. And wow, yeah, I'm just looking through this and getting excited telling you about it. So, all right, that's the third one there, right? Flowing is what he calls it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of On Books. Again, this was hopefully a little bit of a shorter episode. The Inevitable is what we talked about, Kevin Kelly's new book. And each week I discuss books that matter a lot to me, that I think are life-changing. If you read enough of these books, I think you can really change your mind and heighten your consciousness of the way you see the world. So I'm trying to curate a bunch of books that will do that for you and bring you the kernel of knowledge in that book to get you excited and to maybe reading it or to go, hey, that's enough. That book's not for me. So that's what this show is all about. If you like On Books, you can subscribe on iTunes at on-books.com. I put book notes and you can listen to the podcast there. You can tell a friend. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at On Books Show. There's like a million different ways that you can get jazzed about On Books and about books in general. You could also write me too. I'm Chris at on-books.com. Let me know your thoughts. How did you like this episode? Would you like to see shorter episodes, longer episodes, more interviews, all that kind of stuff? And I'll be getting back to, I have this idea of doing more series, I don't know how you say that. I have the Social Good Books series, which is all these books about doing better in the world that I put together. And I'm going to be continuing with that. I have more coming in that list. And I have some other series of books, such as one on nutrition that we'll eventually get to. I have a few other ones in the works. So if there's something on your mind, let me know. I want to get to it. I want to connect and share that with you because I'm really excited. These books are awesome. I didn't write them. I'm just telling you the stories behind them. So that's the show. All right. So that's The Inevitable. I hope you enjoyed it. I want you to do me one more thing. Just have a great day. Just have an awesome day. Smile. Make somebody else smile. Feel good. All right. Signing off from New York City, Chris Castiglione.